Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. We've had on a bunch of other people that are just in the entrepreneurial space, have nothing to do with real estate, but Vondell Burns of the Thankless Productions, Aaron Wiggum of New You, Brooke Reuter talking about contract for deed versus lease to own properties. That's a super interesting podcast where we get into the nuance of whether you want to be a landlord or just collecting interest in essence. So check out some of those podcasts to learn more about some other fun entrepreneurial activities in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Today's episode is brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. Listen, Chris, you know this actually because Brian, your son, is a colleague of ours who works with us, but we do the property management from soup to nuts. Not only do we help our clients with acquisition, but we help them with renovation, leasing, management, maintenance, disposition, everything in between. Our clients can be hiking somewhere at Everest Base Camp, and we can handle everything that goes on with their property and make sure that it runs smoothly. That's why no matter what rental you might have, single family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, we have the management solutions that you need. Go to keyrenterpmc.com or email us at info@keyrenterpmc.com. A huge shout out to Brian Burgin. I actually don't know how we found Brian. He's a little gem. He's a diamond in the rough. One of our best property managers by far. He possesses I suspect it's mostly attributable to you and your real estate portfolio and how you've taught him over the years, but he possesses a sound mind, very reasonable logic, and I enjoy working with him a lot. So thank you to Brian for being a part of our team, but also thank you for having introduced us. We actually originally met because you were trying to dispose of like 75 houses. We were thinking about buying it. We went back and forth. Ultimately, it didn't work, but I was happy to have met you in the process, and I want to get into a little bit about you, Chris Burgin, who is an entrepreneur at heart. He got started with his own paper route as a kid and later franchised a service company. Chris has always had the plan of owning rental properties as part of a retirement plan, but he never put pen to paper as to how that would happen. And after making a start flipping homes in 2014 with very little knowledge, self-proclaimed very little knowledge, but that's not quite the truth. We're going to talk about that. Chris paid for his education with some wins and losses through the process. He shifted from flipping $800,000 properties to buying and renting $85,000 properties for the residual income that those properties provided. And today he owns both single family and multifamily properties totaling 650 doors. That is impressive. Chris, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
The 650 doors doesn't come overnight. It's not, it can, I guess, if you have a lot of capital, but they say a fool and his money are easily parted. So I suspect if you get 650 doors overnight, it might not be the wisest acquisition. Tell us how you got started from making the transition from flipping into buying. What was your first rental, and what did you learn from the flipping business that you were able to put into the buy and hold business?
Well, my first rental was actually in Chicago, which was probably 25 years ago, back when I was in the service business and we were franchising. And that was something that I had always had as part of my plan, was to own rental properties. I didn't have a goal of a number of properties, but just rental properties. So
you were never like, I want to have 650 of these things.
No, it didn't happen that way. That would be something, if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have said never in a million years would that happen. But had the one, had good experience with it, had bad experience. That was part of owning a property, and later relocated to California and sold that. And then through just actually a conversation with a friend of mine who was going to embark on his first rental, I was flipping homes. And I began to think back to, and I had sold my franchise business at that point, but rental went back to franchising for me, which was residual income.
Right.
Flipping is, you do one that's great, you got to go find another one, and it's continual. And versus buying something, hanging on to it, and getting that income stream coming in the mailbox is a good thing. So we started that process and bought one at a time. And 4 years later, I think we had accumulated 40 and thought we're killing it. And we were blessed. I mean, 40 is a lot.
Yeah.
And then somebody had 30 and wanted to sell those. And so it just kind of snowballed from there, where you have opportunities. Instead of one, we got a chunk of 30 or a chunk of 5, and then bought our first multifamily 2.5 years ago.
How many
units? And it was amazing. That was 136 units.
Wow.
And at that point, we had about 110 single family homes. And the light bulb clicked in one closing, we more than doubled what we had accumulated over, at that point, probably 5 or 6 years. And it's been multifamily ever since.
Wow. I mean, that's the tried and true story, is you start with single family and ultimately learn that multifamily is a better utilization, better use of your time, because you can close once, as you said. You're going to do one appraisal, you're going to do one, series of inspections or whatever else. Have you found multifamily to be as good of an investment as a single family portfolio?
Personally, I have found it to be better, and that's everybody's different. I'm at a stage in my life where I don't want to be involved every day. Yeah. So having a property manager between me and a lot of the daily activity is very appealing to me. I don't know that 10 years ago it would have been, but today it is. And then also, I think in multifamily with us, I believe you have more of a direct impact on the value of that proposition and that value of the building itself, because of raising rents and the ROI. Yeah, the cap rates affect that. So for us, it doesn't matter what I get for rent on that single family home. It's compared to the homes adjacent on the street versus we raise rents on a multifamily building, and you can significantly impact the value of that.
I mean, so if you raise rents $100 a month, that's $1,200 a year on an 8 cap. That's 12 times 12 is 14,400 worth of value that you've just created in the property, I guess, right? So if you do that across the portfolio, you can have substantial impact, and you're not being compared to the apartment complex next door necessarily, but you're being, compared to the income, the net operating income that you're generating. Tell me about the bad experience. So in that first property in Chicago, you had a good experience and you had a bad experience. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
The bad experience, and that's what I would, I guess, and I do talk to a lot of friends who are contemplating getting into, I want to buy a rental. My advice to them would be the same to everybody. If you're going to buy one, buy 10, because if you buy one, you're going to be the guy getting every phone call.
Yeah.
And you're the one that when the faucet's leaking, I got to go out and fix that faucet. At least that's the way I treated it. I was a little younger and more ambitious then. But when you get to that level of 10, and I found that again, for me, real estate, everything equates back to my experience in franchising.
Yeah.
And once we got to 10, we became legitimate and kept going from there. And I stepped back and plugged somebody into the role that I was playing. And so same with real estate. When we got to 1, it wasn't that much fun. But when we got to 10 and you start plugging some people in to do things, it becomes more enjoyable.
Yeah. So the scale element. I mean, I've always thought that way in terms of Keyrenter. We take a lot of properties like deep on the north side or in neighborhoods that are less desirable and that their rents are lower, and therefore the management fee that you collect on them is lower. And I've always said, I just want scale, because with scale, I can hire more people and then I can do a better job for the management of those properties, high end, low end. And then with doing a better job in the management of those things, we're going to inevitably get more properties to manage because people see that we're doing a great job. I've always thought that scale is definitely the right way to do it. And the same thing in having 10 properties instead of 1, you can then have the scale to hire a maintenance person. You can have the scale to at least a partial property manager, somebody to take phone calls, whatever else, which is great. But in your bad experience, I mean, what was the specific bad experience? Was there one defining moment or was there not? I guess the essence of my question is really, how do you separate somebody that has a bad experience and then says, you know what, I'm selling this property? Specifically people that are what we call accidental landlords. So they didn't really want to be a landlord. They couldn't sell their house, or they moved to a different neighborhood and they moved to a different city maybe. And they've decided, look, I like the asset class enough. Somebody told me real estate's great, so I'll keep this asset. I already have a fixed 30-year conventional mortgage and I'm paying very little, so I can probably make it work. But then something bad happens, whether that's something egregious like your AC unit being stolen, or just a tenant that puts a couple holes in the walls and it's $1,500 to fix. And I think, you know what, screw this. This is just not for me. That's a terrible experience. some people rebound from that and go, you know what, that was one bad experience, cost me a little bit of money, but in the overall scheme of things, I'm getting depreciation, interest expense. I'm also getting, some cash flow every month. So I'm going to persevere through this one bad experience. And, the rest of them are great experiences when you look back in hindsight. And some of them go, you know what, I'm throwing in the towel. That was a bad experience and I'm going to sell this asset. What do you think differentiates those two people? And what's your experience with that bad experience?
I think that goes back to tenacity. Everybody, and in life, and I had it explained to me actually just a couple of years ago, which helps me a great deal. I mean, no matter whether you own a business, you work for somebody as a staff member, you're going to have days that just are awful. And the tendency for human nature, at least for me, is to throw in the towel. I don't want to deal with this. And I had a friend of mine put it to me in the sense of, at some point in life, everybody's had a bad experience with the oven, but they didn't stop eating.
Yeah.
There's some things that we can and can't stop doing, and the ones that we can, if we don't like them, we just want to quit. And so that was really, for me, I just applied that to, okay, there's no exit door on anything now. So when we have that bad day, whether that could be with a property manager, which fortunately we haven't had yet, but it could be with tenants, it could be with the building itself, but it's just part of it. It's not all good.
Yeah. I sometimes feel as an entrepreneur, like we've built this organization, but in essence, it's just a house of cards. And when one property manager that's handling a lot of stuff leaves, or one, key employee otherwise quits or whatever else, you're like, God, the whole thing is going to collapse. The burden is all on my shoulders. I've got to keep this thing together. And that can be a terrible feeling. And I generally kind of like grit and bear it, get a good night's sleep and wake up early the next morning and just get to work doing what has to be done. And like now that we're 85 people or so, less of that falls onto me. But there were times when we were 15 people that it was like, I just inherited 200 properties to manage, maybe a significant multifamily portfolio. And it's like, I just have to get to work. And it's definitely stressful, but knowing that there's not like an eject button, as you say, and knowing that you can't pass the buck to somebody else. It's either you quit, fold it up and tell all your owners, sorry, I'm not doing this anymore, take back your property, or you just get to work and do it. You got to get it done at some level. And that's the grit. I mean, you call it tenacity. Yeah. We call it, historically, I've always said it's just grit, like the grit of entrepreneurship. You just have to get it done. You've got to break down walls and you've got to get things done.
I think so. There's a ceiling that we break through at every level. Yeah. And usually before you break through that ceiling, there's some pain points to get through that.
Yeah.
And that's even, as you mentioned, I mean, it doesn't all fall on me, and there's others in place to solve some of those problems or clear the hurdles. I still go to bed at night wondering, did they? And I'm communicating with them, and then it's the urge to step in and help them. But I've got to let them do that on their own. Otherwise, I'm going to be helping them for life, and I don't want that.
Yeah, it's true. Why did you get a paper route on as a kid? I mean, what spawned your entrepreneurial desire? At some level, you just need some cash, right? As a kid,
and that was it. I mean, my parents we were not rich, but we weren't poor. But Dad was one who said, if you want some money, you need to go earn it and figure that out. And so
our dad's two peas in a pod.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for that, though. I think that instilled in me at a young age. I mean, my mom was. It was really funny. I remember announcing that I got the paper route, and my mom was furious because that's 7 days a week.
Wow.
So when are we going to go visit, my grandma and my grandfather? It's like, you have to work 7 days a week now. And I didn't realize, I didn't think about that. I just got a paper route and I'm going to make some money now. But we figured out how to delegate. I had a couple of buddies in the neighborhood that if I was going to be gone or play baseball for whatever reason, then I would delegate that to them and pay them to take that day or two or whatever that turned out to be. But it was about, I just always, and I inherited that, I believe, from my grandfather. He was an entrepreneur. And I think it's just kind of in the genes that I wanted to do something. Mm-hmm. I remember back in high school, I worked for a guy that had great influence in my life. And I remember talking to him. And this was when I was entering college. And I said, I do not know what I want to do with the rest of my life, but I want to own my own company. And that was all I knew. And wow. So it's one of those things that I've always pursued that and always done that.
Amazing. My dad would say as a kid, if I asked him for money, he'd say, I thought you had a job. And I'd like, oh man, I'd go get a job. And I've worked from a pretty young age. And when I had a job, he would give me money. So anything I earned, I could
Sure.
save. But if I didn't have a job, he'd say, didn't you have a job before? I thought you had a job. And the taps would stop flowing, so to speak. Our parents had the same, I guess, had the same instincts to make
I
sure that
think
we were always
in the moment that was no fun, but later on that was one of those I circled back and said thanks.
It definitely teaches you respect for the dollar. It teaches you, know, grit, and how to push through stuff. You don't want to get up every morning to run that paper out. Sometimes you don't feel like it. But get through and do it because you don't want to lose that job. You want to make sure you have a little bit of change in your pocket.
Exactly.
I love it. So in my experience with multifamily, the challenge is that they're like a single family house. The likelihood that you're going to get a call at midnight, saying the neighboring, kid is flooding my house with his hose on the side of his house is relatively low. But the likelihood that in a multifamily property, you get a call from somebody that says the kids are taking a bath upstairs and it's flowing out and it's leaking, stripping water down. And now my sheetrock's, soggy and coming down into my kitchen is higher. I mean, the quality of tenant's generally not as good. Everything you said is true about you do one closing, one appraisal, one this, one that, and you can deploy a lot more capital at once, right? So you doubled from 130 to 260 or whatever your numbers were. You can do that and you can scale much quicker. But I just find that the caliber of tenant and the nature of the intensity of the management is so much more. I mean, why has the economics been better for you over time?
I think it's, and again, going back to for us and sitting down with that tenant, I mean, we're setting expectations. I think that's one of the things I learned young. You go for a drive, you don't know where you're going. That's a kind of an anxious feeling of I'm trying to get there, but I don't know where or how. So I think our property managers do a great job of setting expectations, and we don't tolerate much of anything really. And we don't do that in a condemning way. We don't do that in a mother-father role. We do that from the sense of let's just all respect each other. Yeah. And when we went to college, you live in the dorm and you have people in the hallway, you got to respect them. And same thing here. You're paying rent, and that doesn't mean you own the place and you get to do what you want when you want. So we do have, it happens. It happens in anything within this business. But again, that's the benefit for me that goes to the property manager, that goes to the maintenance guys, that goes to a lot of different people before I even know about it. And usually I know about it after it was solved.
Yeah. But ultimately, if you can't charge the tenant for fixing the sheetrock and the unit below, you eat the cost on that. And you might do it. In Class C multifamily specifically, you often see patch after patch after patch in the ceiling of sheetrock where it's been, mudded over and textured over, and it might still be a little bit soft and wet and whatever else. Like it's just expense that's not necessarily incurred in the single family space. And I've never figured out we've owned multifamily. I own a 58 unit building. I own a 28 unit building. We own a lot of smaller boutique multifamily. I've just never figured out how to keep operating expenses in line with how we pro forma them on the front end.
I guess for us, it's been luck. We would patch your ceiling in that C level apartment the same as we would in the $800,000 house. So we're going to make it so that you don't know it. And I am a big believer, right? I learned that a little bit the hard way and through experience. People are going to maintain what level they walk into.
Yeah.
And
true.
We have experienced that. So when somebody moves into a unit, it's been gone through whatever needed to be done was done. Yeah. And we've had pretty good success. You get the one-offs, but that just comes with the territory.
What are some of the key lessons that you learned in that first multifamily acquisition that you applied to future transactions?
The biggest one was when we started that acquisition, there were a number of vacancies. And as the investor coming in, for us, we wanted full, get that thing occupied. Second one was whatever that vacancy rate is, let's just leave it there. Because what ended up, and I don't begrudge the guy, he was just throwing bodies in there. Sure. So we were doing some evictions day one.
Sure.
Versus it is what it is. And we'll take that financial burden and move it forward because we get to select who's in there.
Sure.
And that was the biggest lesson for us. And through that, I don't think there's been any major aha moments for us. It's just been and the key has always been getting the right property manager. And we've inherited some great ones through some of our acquisitions. We've hired a couple, but that's been the biggest key, and supporting them.
And after you transitioned into that first multifamily, have you purchased any other big single family portfolios, or has it been all multifamily from there
It's
forward?
been all multifamily from that forward.
And you're working
We're
on
getting ready. We're working on 192 units that will close in a couple of months. But after that, I would think those are going to be some single, more duplexes and quadplexes. But after that, I think we would be done with anything other than 100 units plus in one geographic location.
And what's your geography for those 650? Plus 18 plus 192, I guess I should say.
Southern, down in Durant, Oklahoma, up to St. Louis, Missouri, and then acquisitions recently were in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Cool.
And areas near that. So it's geographically, we're spread out. We're not anywhere in Tulsa, which is a little frustrating. You always kind of think, man, it'd be great to be able to roll out of bed and drive over and see one, but that hasn't happened yet.
And are you doing video calls with your property managers? Are you visiting the property once a month? And what's your preferred strategy for making sure that you're getting eyes on property?
I go visit. I'm a face-to-face guy. I know video conferencing is in essence that, but I like to be in the room. I like to let them know that we're behind them 100% and they are doing a great job. We get all of them together once a week on a video call, and they can talk about what's working and not working and hopefully collaborate. And out of that produce, whether that's a document on how to do something procedurally or just to let them know they're not in that alone. And when you hear another property manager, when you're talking about your bad day and they say, me too, that actually helps because you're not in that alone.
So you do the video calls, is your entire team on the leadership side, and then all the property managers are all in a room together, in a virtual room together?
Right. That's all the property managers are in the room. And I actually myself backed out of that call recently because we do have somebody that we've designated to lead that. She has a lot of experience in the business, so everybody gravitates to her anyway. So I don't want to be in the way of that. And I think sometimes as the owner, some of the conversations are curbed a little bit because they don't want to be viewed as if they're not meeting expectations, which is never the case. But again, that's a natural thing. So it's just something that I elected to opt out of. And then I go spend time visiting the property and the property managers and the maintenance staff.
And so when you're not on that call, I guess that call would naturally facilitate the feeling that they can pick up the phone and reach out to somebody else that's on the team, but is not in their physical location, and ask for advice and get help or experience share or whatever else.
Yeah. And that was one of the other intentions, was we want them to be able to talk to each other, not just myself or not just Rhonda, who's kind of been the point person leading that. We'll have this fall, we'll have all of them being, again, property managers, maintenance staff. Everybody's going to come to Tulsa. We'll spend 3 or 4 days together and just have some fun. But again, getting everybody in the room. And I think you'll see people leaving with, adding phone numbers to their phones. And that way they've got another point of communication.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're building a corporate culture, disparate in geography, but centralized in I guess, the philosophy. Have you sat down and actually built that? I mean, has that been a conscientious decision, or is it just kind of, this is who we are and you kind of bleed that sort of corporate culture, or that, that philosophy?
I coming from the franchise world, it's been nothing that I put down on paper. It's been one of those organic things. I can kind of see, again, through that growth as a franchise company, I can see what's coming and what those needs are because I heard it 10, 20 years ago. And so now I'm trying to stay in front of that and put the right people in place to head that off before, not that it was an issue, but you don't want to see needs going unmet. So we're trying to put these things in as we acquire new property managers. Not everybody can come and get answers from me. One, because I don't have them all. And two, I can't answer everybody's question at the same time. So opening that up and building that community among them, it has been what I thought was the next step, and it seemed to be well received. They all like each other, and now they talk to them instead of me, which I feel left out, but that's okay. They're getting along.
I mean, I find that to be a hard part. Historically, I was telling you earlier before the podcast that I was in the room where Brian sits and all the property managers sit. And I love that because they could come to me and ask questions. And I thought that was a great way to cascade down the vision for how property management should be done to our core team members that are actually on the front lines doing the work. But as it, I got more and more questions. It's more and more distracting. I can't handle the things that I need to handle, whether that's, addressing lawsuits, dealing with bankers and expanding acquisition of new businesses, et cetera. And you have to eventually pull yourself out. But it's not only do you not want to be perceived as the person that's unapproachable, because now you're in a different room, but you also lose that personal touch. I mean, you grow and lose that ability to directly steer the ship, right? I mean, you're relying now on a coxswain or whatever it's called in rowing to kind of provide guidance and steer the ship. And I don't know if I like that. It's just kind of a necessary evil. Makes me feel out of the loop a little bit, makes me feel a little bit, out of control, but it's essentially necessary if you want to grow a business of any sort.
It is. And I'm a people person in that regard. I played athletics, and so I'm all about the team. And so I want to be a part of that team and be with them, whether it's battle or just enjoying the victory or whatever that case may be. But in order for us as a team to be successful, I've got to step out of that every day and start looking forward into what is next and how are we going to get there. And so plugging those people in and then going back to perhaps pitch hit for a day. I went maybe 6 months ago. I spent a week in St. Louis because everybody was on vacation. So I went up to run the office. Wow. And, for me, it was, hopefully you're seeing I'm not above anything. I'm a part of this and I want to be able to help out. So if you're going on vacation, go enjoy, because I'll probably mess it up while you're away. But when you come back, it'll still be above water at least.
Yeah. Important. I mean, I always say, for any property manager, and they should do everything that any other person in the organization would do. And I'll go in and sweep a house before I move in. If I realize it's just a little bit dirty and somebody's about to move into a house that they're paying whatever you think is good money, they also think it's good money, whether it's $1,000 a month or $25,000 or $3,000 a month, they think it's good money because that's what they've rented. And really important to be able to wear all the hats in the organization if you want to move up and still know what it was like on the front lines. For sure.
Yeah. And I want to help out. And that was, I think, one of the biggest benefits. My son did work for us for a little while, and I don't think that any, I guess I would say, average team member would come in and just say, hey, why don't you butt out of this? You're messing it up. But my son he's my son. So when I would think I'm trying to help in the process, I would get a phone call and just say, will you just leave that alone? We actually have a system. So it really helped me grow as a manager, in the sense of just, when I come to help, I don't come in and start saying what to do. I come in and say, what do you want me to do, or how do you need me to do it?
Funny you say that, because I think Brian was on the front lines of kicking me out of the old office. At some point they came in and they're like, your office has been moved. And now Brian actually sits in my old desk in my old location. But he was like on the front lines along with Matt Lance, one of our senior property managers, also wonderful. They were like, your office is in there. And I was like, oh no, it took me a while. I think I moved some of my stuff, and then I stayed in that office for a long time. And eventually they were like,
yeah, you're done.
And I was like, okay, I get the hint. You want me to butt out? Because sometimes I was like, I think this is the right approach. And they're all, boss, we've figured this part out. Why don't you just go over there?
You're 2 steps behind.
Exactly. My favorite moment was actually, there was a client meeting. One of our biggest clients was in the office. And I guess I kind of like stumbled on the meeting that they were having. And I walked in thinking like I could, add value and whatever else. And they all kind of looked up, they laughed, and they were like, get out. I was like, this is a bittersweet moment. This is a bittersweet moment.
Right.
You guys don't need me. And I feel a little bit hurt, but I also feel a little bit proud,
Sure. That's the day after your children get married. It's bittersweet. It's you did a good job if they're able to figure it out from there. Yeah,
exactly. Tell me about some of your mentors in the business and some of the poignant advice that you may have received that helped you get to this point.
For me, it was, if I go back to the one that had the biggest influence, if you're in Tulsa, Robertson Tire. I grew up working at Robertson Tire.
They're known, just so everybody knows, this is the spot you go when you have need a tire change, you need anything fixed in your car, but they're known for being supremely honest. And they say, hey, you've got just one small leak in your tire. We're going to patch it up, send you on your way for free. And it builds this incredible loyalty. I mean, there's nobody that you love like Robertson Tire. I think it's a little bit like Nordstrom or other companies that have done similar stuff. Yeah. It's like, they don't ask any questions. They're always honest. They're going to tell you a straight answer, and then you just love them for it. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I grew up, Ted Robertson was a family friend. And it was one of those, again, when I turned 16, I got my own car, and summer came and my dad said, go see Ted Monday morning. And I was like, okay. So I went Monday morning and showed up for work. Ted wasn't there, but I was expected, and they put me to work. And through the years, it was not the most fun that I ever had working in Oklahoma. It's 100 degrees in the summer, and I'm in a warehouse full of rubber.
Yeah.
But it was one of those that taught work ethic, but also Ted, he would have conversations with me about life and about entrepreneurship and about, for him, as he said, at that point, he was pretty successful and everybody wanted to come be a part of that. And as he was saying, when it was him stacking the tire, unloading the truck, selling it and putting it on, nobody wanted to come be him.
Right.
So you have to figure out what the end goal is going to be. And there's going to be a lot of hard work to get there.
Right.
And he was just one that always continued to conversationally pour into my life. And he was a great guy. It was back in the day of you just work, and I'm sorry it's lunchtime, but we have too much work to do. So let's keep working. And yes, we close at 5:00, but there's customers out there. So when they're done, we're done. And, again, in the moment, there were days when I wanted to go do other things, obviously, but it taught me a work ethic and taught me how to do it the right way. I mean, as you said, Ted's a guy that if you pulled in and it didn't need anything, he'd pull your car back out and say, you don't need anything. That was everything with him was going to be done the right way and done with integrity. And so I've always tried to carry that. There's been a lot of days in my life as I get older that I think about Ted and talk with him now and again, but it's one of those, where would you be without those people feeding into you?
Yeah. So yesterday I had a conversation. Again, it was about Venture for America. And the idea was, if you can take fellows, as they call them, train them up in the basics of work, right? I mean, that's professional emails, that's doing a little bit of PowerPoint, that's understanding a little bit of financial literacy, and then put them into a business to view firsthand entrepreneurship. They can actually go out and seed new businesses. They can be entrepreneurs. Some of them will just be entrepreneurial within other organizations, which is important. And that's your top brass. Those are the people that are really taking on new projects and pushing things forward within an existing organization. Some of them will just build new companies. And that just helps generally grow an economy, which is something we need here in Tulsa. We don't have a ton of new businesses that are developing. We have a couple of large employers. They're Tulsa Public Schools and they're American Airlines, but we need kind of new entrepreneurial blood, which is so important. And that sounds like what he did to you. I mean, he instilled in you this. I mean, maybe you already had it. You're 16, maybe at 18, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Maybe before, but it's that kind of can-do attitude. Everything is, it's on you as the founder, the business owner to get it done and to lead with integrity. Does the Robertson family still own that tire shop? Did his sons take it over?
Yeah, the sons take it over. I get to have lunch with one of the sons. We were pretty close in age, so we have lunch once a month, and he's his dad. I mean, and I mean that in a very great way. Everything is done right. Everything's done with respect. He cares about everybody that works for him, and he knows everybody that works for him, good or bad. He knows them all, and it's just the way he was taught and bred, and that's the way he does it. So they're still as good as they've ever been.
Wow, I love it. Tell me a little bit about stuff that you're reading, podcasts, just anything that inspires you to be better at work, personal life, family.
For me, I've read one of the most recent ones, Distance Manager. That's again something as I'm trying to figure out. Sure. Yeah, and these folks are all 2 hours plus away, or an hour and 30 minutes to Fort Smith, but none of them do I get to go sit with every day. Sure. And so trying to figure out how to stay in tune and how to put those systems and processes into place. Those are things that help me. And just, I like to read a lot about management books, good or bad. And it doesn't have to be business management. As I said, I played athletics, so I love to read about baseball or football or whatever that might be. I'm always intrigued by successful organizations. They didn't get all the best talent. That never happens. It's something at the top. I mean, if I look at Alabama and Nick Saban, and the guy wins year in, year out, whether I like it or not, I'm an OU fan, but it starts at the top. It changed when Nick Saban arrived, and it's been at that standard ever since. And so reading about management at whatever level and whatever business or athletic endeavor, I enjoy reading those things. And Podcasts, that's a new one for me. Generationally, that's not something I gravitate to. But I like to drive to California to see my daughter. So when I do that, that's generally because I'm going to do a podcast or listen to one or two of them. So I don't have any one real estate podcast that I listen to. I try to expose myself to whatever's out there. Mm-hmm. So I've listened to a variety of those and picked up how people do things and systematize their business, which is, again, what I'm really trying to do. Is I think we'll get into maybe some flips again, not anything at the scale I was doing before, but the one-offs. I think, again, as the entrepreneur, when business becomes boring for me, when it becomes systematized and I no longer have to do anything. So I've got to step out and figure out what to challenge myself with and what to do. And I think flipping will be that, just not out of any financial need, but just out of, I need to keep myself busy and in the game.
I mean, it's amazing that you're still in the flow. It's like the market has been peaked out. Now we're seeing it come down as interest rate rise a little bit, but you bought straight through the toughest years to buy. I mean, there's so much competition to buy multifamily properties, and you seem to have found some sort of formula for sourcing deals when it's been, as a person that also likes to buy real estate, it's been really challenging to buy good deals.
I think we've been blessed. I mean, that's nothing that we went out and did. And I say we because I've got a couple of business partners in that. And I think as I go back to Ted, doing things the right way, doing things which you say you're going to do. So for us, when we say we're going to do something, we did it, and we did it on the day that we said we closed. So when you get that reputation, when there is something out there in a market that is challenging, we've gotten some phone calls out of the blue of some things that were available off market. And we got those because we performed well the first time, treated everybody fairly, and got the deal done. And that's, I guess, the thing for us. It's not, if they're asking $1 million, it's not about trying to get it for 900 and trying to find a reason why. It's, if it's worth $1 million, pay $1 million and be done and move on. And so we've taken that approach, and so far it's worked. So we'll keep doing that.
I love it. Chris Burgin, an entrepreneur at heart. We appreciate your perspective on tenacity and growing a business. You own 650 multifamily and single family doors. So you're doing something really, really right. I only know your one son, but you certainly raised a great son there too. Where can people find you if they want to reach out, have a deal for you, or maybe want to get a little bit of mentorship or advice?
Yeah, they can reach me at email, chris@crestlineproperty.com.
Beautiful.
I don't have a website. I don't have any of that other fancy stuff. We just do our thing every day. So if somebody's got a question and I can answer it, I will. But that's how we do it.
I love it. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.